Yo, what is up, guys? It's Virtual 1670 here, and today I would like to go over my speed farming build on my HotA barb. Today we're going to be going over our Paragon, gear, and skills. This will get you in the dungeons and out of them as fast as possible, giving you amazing speed bursts and damage at the same time, allowing you to get the maximum output for gear and gold every hour. Let's check it out. Let's go over our skills first. In basic skills, we're going to put 1 point into lunging strikes. We're going to put 1 point into enhanced strikes. We're going to put 1 point into lunging strikes. Once we're done with that tree, we're going to move down to core skills. We're going to put 5 points into Hammer of the Ancients, 1 point into Enhanced Hammer of the Ancients, and 1 point into Furious Hammer of the Ancients. In the same tree, we're going to move down and put 3 points into Pressure Point. We're then going to move to the next tree, defensive skills. We're going to put 5 points into Rallying Cry, 1 point into Enhanced Rallying Cry, and 1 point into Tactical Rallying Cry. We're going to move down in the same tree and put 5 points into Challenging Shout, 1 point into Enhanced Challenging Shout, and 1 point into Tactical Challenging Shout. We're then going to move on to the next tree, which is Brawling Skills. We're going to put 1 point into Warcry, 1 point into Enhanced Warcry, and 1 point into Mighty Warcry. In the same tree, we're going to move down a little bit and put 3 points into Booming Voice, 1 point into Raid Leader, and 1 point into Guttural Yell. In the same tree, we're also going to put 1 point in Aggressive Resistance, and 3 points into Prolific Fury. Going back up in the same tree, we're going to add 2 points to Swiftness to give you that speed burst. We're going to move down to the next tree, which is Weapons Mastery. We're going to put 3 points into Pit Fighter and 1 point into Hamstrings for the bleeding effect on slow enemies. We're going to move down to Ultimate Skills. We're going to go ahead and put 3 points into Heavy Handed, 3 points into Wallop, and 3 points into Concussion. We're going to move over. We're going to put 1 point into Wrath of the Berserker, 1 point into Prime Wrath of the Berserker, and 1 point into Supreme Wrath of the Berserker. We're going to move down to the last tree, Key Passives, and we're going to put 1 point into Unbridled Rage. Let's move. Alright, moving on to the gear. On the helmet, you're going to want Might. Basic skills grant 20% damage reduction for 2 seconds. The stats you're going to want on the helm is either cooldown reduction, Fury, Armor, Strength, Dex, and Life. Moving on to the chest, we have Numbing Wrath. Each point of Fury generated while at maximum Fury grants 36 Fortify, Barbarian only. The stats on the chest you're going to want to look for are ranks to any challenging shout, damage reduction while fortified, damage reduction to close enemies, armor percentage, and damage reduction from ranged. Moving on to the gloves. Retribution. Distant enemies have an 8% chance to be stunned for 2 seconds when they hit you. You deal 20% increased damage to stunned enemies. The stats you're going to want to look for on your gloves are going to be HotA rank, crit chance, lucky hit, attack speed, strength, dex, and all stats. Moving on to the pants. Warlord leg plates of the Protector. Damaging an elite enemy grants you a barrier absorbing up to 8,954 damage for 10 seconds. This effect can only happen once every 30 seconds. The stats you're going to want on your pants are going to be damage reduction while fortified, damage reduction while to close enemies, armor percentage, damage reduction to distant enemies, and damage reduction to bleeding enemies. Moving on to the boots. Ghost Walkers. While unstoppable and for 4 seconds after, you gain 25% increased movement speed and can move freely through enemies. The stats you're going to want to look for on the boots are faster run walk percentage, berserk duration, resource cost reduction, move speed after killing elites, giving us that extra push to get through the dungeon faster. Moving on to the two-handed weapon, we have Ancestral Force. Hammer of the Ancients quakes outwards, dealing 84% or an X amount of damage to enemies. The stats you're going to want to look for on your two-handed weapons are vulnerable damage, crit damage, damage to close, core damage, damage to bleeding enemies, and slow, along with strength, and all stats. Moving on to the one-handed weapons. On your first one, you're going to put Edge Master. Skills deal up to 20% damage based on your available primary resource when cast, receiving the maximum benefit while you have full primary resources. And the skills you're going to want on your one-handed weapons are going to be vulnerable damage, crit damage, close damage, core damage, bleed damage, or damage to slow. You can also get strength or all stats on your one-handed weapons. On your second one-handed weapon, you're going to want to go with Conceited. Deal 17% increased damage while you have a barrier active. This is very big for us, as a lot of our damage bonuses and some of our damage bonuses are going to be coming from our barrier while it is active. Going on to your second two-handed weapon, you're going to be using Limitless Rage. Each point of fury you generate while at maximum fury grants your next core skill 4% increased damage up to 60, which is huge for us because we stack or try to stack fury on most of our gear, because the higher it is, the more damage we are going to do, and it is multiplicative. Moving on to our ring, we're going to put Echoing Fury on one of our rings. Your shout skills generate 4 fury per second while active. This allows us to use our shouts and gain fury at a high increased rate, allowing us to spam our Hammer of the Ancients. Now, the stats you're going to want on your ring are Fury Generation, which can only be accumulated on Ancestral, Crit Chance, Fury, crit damage, and vulnerable damage. And this goes for both of our rings. The aspect you're going to want on your next ring is Chieftains. Whenever you cast a shout skill, its cooldown is reduced by 1.9 seconds per nearby enemy up to a maximum of 6 seconds. This is extremely huge for us barbarians, as we want our shouts to come off cooldown extremely fast. The faster our shouts come off cooldown, the more mitigation, the more damage, our faster uptime. We can keep our speed up and get through the dungeon as quick as possible. Moving on to our amulet. We're going to be taking Disobedience. You gain 0.75% increased armor for 4 seconds when you deal any form of damage, stacking up to 75%. This is going to give us a big, huge, massive, super duper increase on our armor and mitigation towards higher enemies, taking less damage so we can move forward in the dungeon without taking a load of damage. This helps us a lot. The stats you're going to want on your amulet is cooldown reduction, defense to all skills, fury cost reduction, and fortified damage reduction. You can also go for movement speed. So that is the gear. Let's move on to the Paragon points. Starting at the bottom of the Paragon board, the first glyph we're going to take is Territorial, giving us damage to close enemies and a bonus of 10% damage reduction against close enemies. The next board we're going to go into is Weapons Master. The glyph we're going to be using for that is Martial. After casting a shout skill, the active cooldown of every other shout skill is reduced by 1.2 seconds. It also gives us 18% physical damage, 186 armor, 17 dexterity, and 8 willpower. The shout is amazing on this glyph because it allows us to cast our other shouts a lot sooner. The next board we're going to take is Warbringer. Warbringer, for every 75 fury you spend, gain 12% of your maximum life as fortified. This helps us with damage reduction, mitigation. And moving on to the glyph for this board is Wrath. Critical strike damage with core skills. Skills that critically strike generate 3 Fury, allowing us to cast HotA a lot sooner and more often, and using Flurry. The next board we're going to take is going to be Decimator. And the glyph we're going to be using for Decimator is Imbiber. It gives us damage while healthy, and the bonus you get is you gain 30% increased potion healing. After that board, we're going to move on to Bonebreaker. And in Bonebreaker, we're going to be using Exploit. 38% vulnerable damage. When an enemy is damaged by you, they become vulnerable for 3 seconds. This cannot happen more than once every 20 seconds per enemy. Moving on, we are going to take on the next board, Flawless Techniques. And in Flawless Techniques, the glyph we're going to be using is Undaunted. Damage while fortified, and the bonus, you gain up to 10% damage reduction the more fortify you have. And that is it for the Paragon board. Let's move on. All right, guys, and for the last little bit of this guide, we're going to go over expertise and what technique you should be using. Now, you should be using the two-handed sword expertise because it gives you 20% of direct damage you deal is inflicted as bleed damage over 5 seconds. This is good for when you're going into a bunch of mobs, you're hitting them really hard, your expertise, your sword expertise are working well with your rend, and things are dying behind you and bleeding so you don't have to stay behind. And this is for the more so the little mobs. The weapon you're going to be using, if you press S and you go into your available skills. Now, what you can do is you can pick between what weapon you want to use for a certain skill. So lunging strikes, you're going to want the two-handed mace. You're going to use your middle mouse button. You're going to scroll down, and it's going to switch what weapon you're using. Now, I recommend overall you use your two-handed mace, as this build is set up for using two-handed maces. If you want to switch the build, you can and go to your two-handed sword, or you can use your two-handed weapons for this build, or changing this skill specifically to Flurry. With Hammer of the Ancients, we are using the two-handed mace because the build benefits from the mace. So that is it for this guide. I hope you guys enjoyed. I will show you guys some quick gameplay of the Barb in action. Don't forget to comment and subscribe. You can catch me on Twitch TV. My name is Virtual1670. Thanks for tuning in and watching this video, and I'll see you guys later. See ya.